Good evening, everyone. This is the January 8th meeting of the Needham Community Preservation Committee. I'm Dave Herod, CPC Chair. As a reminder, this meeting is being broadcast to the town's YouTube channel and via Zoom, and is being recorded for publication, later viewing, and administrative purposes. Seems like everybody's here, so I won't do a roll call. Except Jim is out sick. So, yeah, let's get started. The first item on the agenda is approving the minutes of 12/11/24, the last meeting.
Oh, actually, I don't have the minutes for you. Apologies, but we'll have them for the next meeting.
All right, so we can bypass that. Our presentation tonight is from the Needham History Center. They're not here yet, but hopefully they'll be here. So let's skip to the CPC project updates. I don't know if anybody is really prepared to discuss the projects, but you know, we can do that if you want. Anybody has any updates or any questions?
I'm sorry, I missed it. Are we not getting the history center?
They're not here yet.
Gloria's on her
Yeah.
way. She's coming for another meeting and said she might be a few minutes late.
Yeah, so
What is the schedule of the presentations? I know tonight is the History Center. What about the?
Yes.
one
We can-
follow?
yeah,
Our next meeting on the 22nd will be presentations from Park and Rec on the pickleball and action park, and also on Elliott School, and then we'll have the Bay Colony Rail Trail. So we'll have 3 on the 22nd.
22nd.
And then on February 5th, we will have the NHA presenting on their projects. On February 12th, we'll have Charles River presenting. Oh, and actually, on the 22nd, we will also have the Danes
Conservation.
project with the Conservation Commission.
okay, so
I do.
oh, here's Gloria. No, we just jumped into that.
I can. Circulate it. Hello.
Just Yeah.
No, we just in time.
That's right.
Oh,
yeah.
Marshall, why don't you come join me at the end?
Well, welcome. Okay, tonight we have a presentation from Neiman History Center. You have Gloria Grice, who's the executive director, and Mark Bluzing, who is
Board member.
board member. And the
Sometimes it's
Right.
wrong.
The Mr. Fix-It.
Waiting for somebody to double
As
open.
former
Right on
CPC
backward.
chair,
Yeah.
just for the new members that don't know this, Mark led the CPC for many years and was my original, I think you were my
Yeah.
original chairman, and served for at least 6 or so more, 10 years.
How can you serve for 10 years? I thought it was like,
Because they didn't appoint someone when my time was up,
oh, so yeah,
and there was another appointment for. The town council said I should continue another year while they.
all right.
And we have 2/3 of our members are new, this is their first time through, right?
Oh.
So I think,
Okay,
and you're the first project they're reviewing.
Oh, excellent.
all right, so I think you have a.
So you won't know if we do it wrong.
You can stay there if you want for the presentation.
I'm sorry?
You can use this if you want.
Oh, okay, do it.
Turn it on the
Thank you.
side, there's a
Yeah.
power button.
I'm sorry?
There's a power button on the side of that.
Ah. Okay.
Should work.
Okay. All right, so thank you, everybody. Thank you for entertaining our proposal and having us here. This is an ongoing collection storage upgrade. Because we have had previous CPC support in 2012, when we initiated this project, CPC kindly provided funding to hire a collections manager to support her salary for a few years, and also to purchase the various initial supplies, the computer, the software, the things it needed to start the job. And then in 2018, CPC again granted us money to continue that project, to do some more of the rehousing and inventory, supported her salary for a couple more years, and then our own budget took over that process. The main two questions I want to raise tonight, or want to answer tonight, are the questions that came up in questions to me were preservation and yeah, just forgetting. Preservation and public benefit. So just a little bit of review, we're requesting $67,712 for the supplies that are laid out in the proposal. We're putting in for this project, an additional $8,500 of staff and volunteer costs, which are also enumerated in the spreadsheet, for a total project cost of $55,000 and change. And this is the current situation in our storage area. You could still see there are some shelves that have yet to be boxed, but basically we have these lovely archival supplies, many of which were purchased with CPC funding, but you can see that the shelves are not adequate for handling this volume. The boxes of necessity take more space. Things are stuffed into various containers and crammed into boxes. You take them out, you spread them out, you buffer them with tissue and stuff to make them properly stored. That is a more space intensive use. So now as we do this, the boxes get stacked up in big heaps on the floor. Here's another view, and you can see in that left-hand one, we're using library shelves. The library was kind enough to give us shelving when they renovated.
It's from the high school.
Was it high school?
The
High school lab? Okay.
2007 and 8.
Okay, but so you can see we can get two of those sort of banker style boxes onto a shelf, and we can get two of those flat boxes which hold textiles, clothing and flags and accessories onto those shelves. They're very inefficient in terms of space use. They don't hold very much. And then the additional problem is we have a lot of paintings and framed works that don't have a place right now and are stacked into piles. And so our supply list is essentially shelving to replace that shelving, and this shelving is sized to accommodate those boxes. So each shelf, rather than taking two boxes, can take, depending on which range, the various range sizes, can take from 8 to 12 boxes per shelf over, a stack of 4 to 5 shelves. So it's a significant increase and significant improvement in the amount of material we can store essentially within the same shelving footprint and get a lot of that stuff off the floor. And then for the things that don't yet have a good storage solution, we'll be able to upgrade that as well. Yeah.
I have a question. What's the white, is that a water protection barrier of some kind?
It's a
Right.
vapor barrier. It's
It
got
is.
insulation behind it.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that's technically an unfinished room that we finally insulated and put vapor barrier over so that we could maybe temper the space enough by leaving the doors open to the heated portion of the storage.
Right.
Well, yeah,
How do you box up the pictures?
they won't be. I actually, I'll show you in a minute how those are gonna be handled. So this is a floor plan of our upstairs, the area with the red is that attic space. I was basically standing in that doorway perpendicular to those three main ranges. And those photos you were looking at were primarily those three main ranges, so you could see that the aisles were full. The shelves were full, boxes are stacked in all the intervening spaces. That's the area that we'll be renovating with the new shelving. And that's essentially where, and that's keyed, you have this in the packet. It's keyed to each type of shelf and each, each size, which is also keyed to the budget spreadsheet. And this is essentially what we're looking at. The shelving is this heavy-duty modular shelving. It comes in various increments of length and depth and height, so we can tailor them to be appropriate for the boxes and to be appropriate for the space. And those blue racks are the way the framed works are gonna be stacked. They can stand on end, and we would have a buffer material between each one, so they're not, rubbing up against each other, but they'll stand straight, they won't slump, and they won't be supporting each other, which is a much better situation for them.
Part of this is because there was some damage at the property from, I think, a flood or water or something.
No, what part of this is because we had to do emergency roofing.
Yeah.
We typically try and budget, we have a capital reserve budget for projects like this. But we ended up having to do painting and roofing in the same year, which
And
was,
so you spent that, so you're not able to,
yeah.
But my question on that is part of the storage under that roof
Yes,
Yeah,
in the attic area?
if we go back to the plan,
So is,
the art rack area, that's
Right.
under the slope roof. The area to the left is a high 8-foot ceilings strut and joist area, so that's essentially the same as the finished space, but it's just finished with insulation
sure.
paper.
My question is there, while you have storage material, like a couple inches on that bottom shelf, it's only a few inches from the floor.
yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was in the basement area as well, and if you needed it to be like 8 inches off or 12
This
inches
is
off.
not, this is all attic space. It's not the basement space. And no, we had leakage through the roof, but not flooding.
Right.
I mean, it was seepage.
And it was also in the older section of the house,
Yeah.
not the,
Got
this is
it.
a new
This is,
construction.
yeah, it wasn't in the store. It was in the
To the right.
sort of where the crossroads of those main hallways are,
Okay,
which is where the old house
thanks for clarifying.
joins, yeah. Okay, so the question arose is why, why is this a preservation project? And, the CPC bylaw specifically states that all historic preservation projects have to adhere to the Department of the Interior's required standards, and this is a huge manual of many hundreds of pages that they publish. And it's an aspirational list. Nobody ever reaches the end of the DOI's required standards because the book is, is like this. But every project should move forward. You should never have a project that doesn't get you, however incrementally closer. And that's one of the things we need to do in this situation. If you look at A, for example, provide storage space large enough for existing museum collections, clearly the space we have is not large enough. It's not organized, point C, for safe passage of objects and staff. One of the problems, in addition to, everything just being stacked up, that also means we can't get to things, we can't access things. When people are interested in seeing something, there are a lot of things we can't reach. But it also means that we can't do routine pest maintenance because we can't get into those boxes. Typically, you don't look at every box every day, but you do spot checks on a regular basis. Then that will turn up problems. We are not able to do that either. We have, moved increasingly toward the stable environment and the appropriate storage materials, but we're still not reaching that standard of space and accessibility that we need to get to, and this project is built to address that. And then the second question is the town council raised the issue of public benefit. To start with, the History Center is a public, it's a nonprofit public charity. It's not a private museum, so it is owned. It is essentially owned by the town. A nonprofit is a sort of general possession stewarded by its board, but not physically owned by anybody in the institution. And our mission is to make our assets publicly available, to be able to answer people's questions, to be able to display what we have, to be able to facilitate people's research, questions about their homes, or we get a lot of college students that have questions for projects that, we need to bring materials for. That's what we do, is we make this and then make this material available to people, and we try and do that. But we try to make that as easy as possible. So we don't charge for most of our programs that are not specifically fundraisers are offered for free. We don't charge for the museum for people to come in. We don't charge for people to do research. A lot of museums charge for research. We don't. We try and make it as accessible and as welcoming to the public as we can. And we also try and offer as many of our resources as we can, to work on town committees or work with other civic groups. So I think we do meet that public benefit standard. And I know there was additional, Lauren asked about a vote by the Historical Commission. We do need also an affirmative vote by the Historical Commission that our assets are relevant, significant to the history of Needham, and our meeting is Monday, and we'll have that vote, and I'll convey the results of that to you as soon as the meeting happens. Does anybody have any questions about either the presentation or proposal?
Town council satisfied with your response to public benefit?
Is he?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
Oh,
asking-
no, I don't know. No, I don't, yeah.
You're saying he raised the
You
question.
raised the question,
Yeah,
but
I think the question's been answered.
he hasn't,
I don't think,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Gloria, did you mention that you also do outreach programs for the schools?
we do outreach program for the schools. Both the third grades in the state standards have to come to their historical society. We have a school day program for them that we run at no cost to the town. Every third grader in town comes through that program. We do additional school programs. We host school programs. They're gonna be doing Texploration in 2 weeks. But also, we do field, they come over for map quests and scavenger hunts, and we bring materials over to the schools. We had a big box of Native American artifacts that would travel back and forth for the fourth grades and things like that. We basically try and do everything we're asked, because that's the fun part of what we do.
My son did it last year. He had the best time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
He's
mean,
very interested in the food, what they ate back then. That was his whole.
that was a big
That's
thing for
it.
my son too.
Yeah.
We had a
they're
big
very
fight over
interested.
mayonnaise.
Oh, is that right? Oh, can only imagine a mayonnaise history fight in your house.
He was okay with bread and turkey, but he had to have mayonnaise.
That's too funny.
Fortunately, mayonnaise was
Well,
invented for Napoleon,
That's,
so
oh,
developed by one of Napoleon's chefs, so he was okay on the mayonnaise.
what a wealth of information you have there. Gloria. It's amazing.
I had to look that up.
Well, Gloria, I see that you are just amazingly open to anyone who wants to come in,
I hope so.
who needs to
That's-
use the space,
That's
as
what
the
we
Needham
for.
Women's Club did, or perhaps still does.
Yeah,
I also see that your collection, if you can't store and retrieve this collection easily, then it's impossible really to run the museum in the way that you need to. And you're preserving something that can never happen again.
what we have is unique, and it's, it's sort of the chicken egg of, the insurers say, well, what's the value of your collections? Well,
Prices.
yeah, I mean, literally, because there are things that, it's not that they have a high monetary value, but they can't ever be replaced.
Right.
There's never,
Exactly.
and our job is to keep and preserve those collections, but to keep and preserve them so they can be so they can be used, so people can see them, learn from them, study them, we want them to take the lessons, you study history to understand the present. Yeah, it's nice to know what went on in the past, but it doesn't do you any good if it doesn't have a context. And so, what we're trying to do is create this universe of knowledge that not only tells people like what their town was like, what things were like, but also how to use that information now, for their present. Now, how did the town get to be the way it is? How did what they did affect what we did now? How does what we do affect what they're, what's gonna happen for our kids? That sort of whole continuum of history as arranged, and you need to be able to access this. You need to be able to get to this stuff. It doesn't tell anybody anything for me to say, someplace in there, we have this really great thing, which I can't show you.
Well, she
You know.
talks about the people that come in and wanna do some research on some small aspect, maybe their family or a house they
Yeah.
live. We don't send them into the back room and let them start foraging.
Yeah.
Everything's brought out by our volunteers and the collection manager or Gloria and brought down for them, and they lay it out, and so they get a lot of assistance, so we really do help people figure out these things, and it's important that the amount of work that people, the volunteers have done over the years to archive a lot of material.
I mean, you
It's
can,
really important, and
you can
sort of the
see all
paper
these-
goods we can get to.
Yeah.
Now we've been able to, with the funding through you guys and through the History Center itself, get the collections manager to get a lot of things that were just, I helped move from Glendon Road when they moved this project, and it was bags and bags and trunks and
mildewed
boxes
boxes
and
and,
things that we hauled over
yeah,
and started to, and then we got hold of these shelves from the high school, which originally sat at a slight angle until we figured out a way to
To
tank
level,
and
yeah.
install them flat, so at least we could use them.
Yeah.
We could start to break into this large archive of things, and there's a ton of stuff in the basement that we still need to do, but we wanted to focus on the items that we had established so far and get better conditions to store those first.
There's
Yeah, yeah.
that, but there's also, you can't create this stuff again.
No.
We can't create the history of Needham again. So we've got to preserve what we have, is my feeling. That's
Yeah,
what you're
and
asking.
those boxes, right now they're sort of presented as a barrier, but those boxes are a really good thing. Everything in those boxes is clean and laid out properly in tissue. It's got supports where it needs supports. It's got separations where it needs separations. It's not, we went from literally like a banker's box full of random shoes, they've been padded and stuffed and paired up properly and, organized by date and sometimes by person if we know, so everything is, those boxes are really great. The problem is we can't get to them now. We just need a better way of storing them.
All right, so, anybody else have any other questions? Well, thank you for coming, and
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't think there's any question that the History Center
Oh, we did-
provides public
Okay.
benefit
Sure.
to the town. I think the question by the town council was he was just not familiar with the History Center and what he does. So I don't think that is an outstanding question anymore.
I would just like that, I think there are three things that were raised by town council, and the other two were addressed as well. Not just the public benefit part. So. Or you will get the votes on Monday, the third one here, so.
We need to close the loop formally with town council.
No, I don't think so.
That's great. Thank you. The History Center is a gem.
Yes.
People don't know about it. I'm like, it's right there. Just go anytime. Boy, they're always there. Go visit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Wonderful work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you.
Take care.
I did have a question on another application.
Well, let's get to that. So the next item on the agenda is the, just updates or any outstanding questions on the projects out there. We just went through the History Center. I don't know if Maureen, you and Betsy have anything to add or bring up with regard to Charles River?
I know we were able to go to see the land in person, which was great. I mean, I've seen it, because my son does programs up there, but it was nice to stand right in the middle of kind of the land that they're developing and see it,
Take care.
kind of a whole 360. And they've included it in the agenda, but we just got bigger versions of those artist renderings of the buildings and how it's all gonna be laid out.
Did you guys see that 100-page thing that?
Oh,
The
yeah.
the existing buildings are gone, right?
The existing buildings have all been taken down. Those were old veterans like homes, small, like kind of ranch style
Yeah,
homes.
on
They're all
steps.
removed. So the land is totally just ready to go. But yeah, they're not gonna be able to start building until obviously money comes through, permitting, things like that. But, yeah, they definitely, as the proposal says, their planning is to sort of include housing for both people, disabilities and low income and sort of together. And have some community amenities like the community room. There's gonna be a trail that's gonna be accessible to the public that kind of goes around it. It's all wooded up there if you've never been up there. So it would be beautiful for that. And it's somewhat secluded, so you're not abutting neighbors. It's actually a really great spot. It's a really great parcel. And they seem to have the planning, and they seem to have everything in all their ducks in a row. It's just the whole, as we know from NHA, it's the funding and it's everything that you have to follow along to get that funding that you need to
Yeah,
make it happen.
if they don't get the funding, it's going to be put off another year. it
At
looks
least,
like.
yeah, yeah.
And they incorporate a population here that is underrepresented. The children with disabilities, and
This would be
they
for
don't
adults.
just,
yeah.
they don't isolate them, they make them part of the community. This is an underserved population that we are lucky to have and lucky to be able to do something with. The whole proposal I thought was extremely well thought out. They pretty much answered all the questions. There were some, because from the tear downs of the buildings, asbestos was, a possibility. They didn't know if it was, but, lead. But they know how to deal with this. Every builder knows how to deal with this.
Yeah.
And it had presented itself as problems. If you don't, then forget it. But I'm just saying that they kind of looked at everything. As a realtor, you run into asbestos, you run into all this stuff. You're like, ooh, nice surprise. Thank you. But builders know how to deal with it. So I'm just raising, that they were honest, I felt, about the challenges. But again, it's an underserved population. We're not just talking kids, we're talking the parents. And we're talking the community in general, shows our heart, so anyway, I thought it was very well.
Anybody else have any questions about this at this point?
On this, and also with the projects from the Needham Housing Authority. My question on the funding, and we'll drill into this on another time, but the 4% tax credit, I think, is oversubscribed. So that's gonna raise some questions for me about, alternative financing sources and whether it makes more sense, and it's not for us to determine. It's for you guys to satisfy yourselves with the, and also for the Charles River Center, they have to satisfy themselves, but there are some things in the financing that I had some questions about, but we'll get into that, I'm sure.
I do take given what we know and the large proposals we have before us this cycle, I did mention to them that this was going to be difficult to fully fund, that this would be, we can't guarantee, I just want them to know there are a number of proposals that we are looking at, and I just don't want them going into it thinking it's gonna be fully funded, or it's like it's a done deal, because we just have a lot before us, and
Smart.
there's just
Yeah.
only so much funding that's available this cycle.
I want everybody to know that we're looking into some alternative approaches to funding. So, you know, that question is answered. Yeah, yeah. I think it's clear that there's not enough money in the bucket this year for both those projects. However, there may be some possibilities to have it stretched out.
Right,
And so, you know, in fact, we haven't set it up, but we're gonna set up a meeting with Dave Davidson.
Oh, yeah.
Cecilia and, you know, and then we have Emily, our consultant coming in. So we're gonna, you know, brainstorm some approaches there. But, you know, you might ask your proponent or applicant to be thinking about, you know, possibilities for, you know, that kind of, you know, what would be
Other sources,
Yeah,
and other
for
sources.
like you know, I'm trying to think of a good term to describe the, you know, the commitment, a multi-year commitment. of money. Okay, now,
which is similar to what, you know, the Needham Housing Authority was saying that they was acceptable to them.
well, I don't think, you know, we're in a position to, you know, discuss this at length, but,
Right.
you know, one thing that's not on the table is, the town can't, finance a bond that's taken out by somebody else.
Right,
Okay, yeah, but there's other approaches that may be
Right.
workable, so we'll have to look into that.
May I suggest, if the applicant is gonna be presenting on February 12th, is that what I remember you saying?
Correct.
And if there are questions that not just Adam, but anybody has, it has been done in the past, and it's not a bad idea to do another round of question collection
Yeah, that's a
before
good
you do the
idea.
applicant, so they could address them at that right off the bat, because when we get into February, we're gonna in the countdown to the March public hearing. You know, it doesn't leave a lot of time, just a suggestion,
Yeah, and Emily's gonna have a few questions,
And-
I'm sure.
but I'm just suggesting members.
Yeah,
Because I actually had maybe you're not done, but I had a different question from the sort of gauntlet that's been run over the last couple of years for the project, which is, I wasn't clear from this application, and I can write this down and send it into Lauren, but in terms of their readiness to proceed from the point of view of zoning, and I'm looking over at Adam, because you know, well, you know, that it's not something, it takes many months. And looking at their schedule, they were saying, well, maybe we're gonna do a 40B, or maybe we're gonna do new affordable housing district, or they're gonna do something else. And you can't put the application in for funding in the fall of 2025 unless you have your zoning nailed down and, you know, approved. So above the bond, other elements of readiness to proceed. There's sort of a question, a zoning, a planning board question of where do things stand? You know, I'd like
Well-
to hear some more discussion of on,
isn't it true that if they do a friendly 40B,
well, I don't know.
yeah, they don't have to
Whether
go to
that's
the
been
planning
agreed
board.
to or not, or how that doesn't happen overnight either, you know, so.
yeah.
I don't think they can do a 40B now, can
No,
they?
no,
So-
they can do a friendly 40B, but that's it.
But I thought 40B applied in cases where the town didn't have its
It's-
affordable housing
Right,
That's not,
requirements.
but a friendly 40B, is something that's.
Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah, so when the town hits that threshold, which we did, what Dave's referring to is effectively an unfriendly 40B program. But having achieved that 10%, I think we're
40B
somewhere.
is over, I thought.
It's not, it's not totally over, because you can do what Dave's talking about as a friendly 40B. So you still, you know, you can exceed the dimensional regulations and your zoning by agreement with the town.
Okay.
If you're gonna provide, I think,
I thought you had to be below that 10%.
No,
But
not for a friendly 40B.
and there's a bit of nuance to that, because I think if it's an unfriendly 40B. Yeah, it's unfriendly because they don't really need the town.
we don't need the.
Describe, you know, exactly, they can kind of shut it through. But if it's a friendly 40B, you kind of negotiate it a bit.
Yes, and
but to Reg's point, it's valid.
And it takes a while to develop it.
Well, can I,
Yeah.
can I just say definitively that
That'll be fine.
unfriendly 40Bs is only when you're below the 10%. And they're forcing, a developer's forcing something through, that's where the unfriendly comes from. But you could still use the provisions of chapter 40B to fast track or expedite getting the kind of zoning that you need for a project that does not conform to existing zoning. But when it's friendly, you're doing it in cooperation with the town, using the planning board. And
ZBA, I think.
where I'm really going is on the 12th, I'm gonna ask, where do you stand in terms of having at least an initial discussion with the planning board as to what course of action you're going to take? And if that question isn't addressed before we get to February 12th, it's gonna be difficult, given how the process of discussions of things were, for that to be completed by March, when we're gonna have to make a
At
decision.
that point, it's probably worth reaching out to them now and ask them to get in touch with Lee Newman immediately and find out what their plan is for zoning conformity. Because Lee will determine if it's gonna be a ZBA, which I think it is, if it's a friendly 40B route, or if they're gonna want a planning board to like do a zoning bylaw change like we did for you. In which case that will affect the timing of all of this, and maybe we punt on this for a year because. You know, it's certainly not gonna happen for May. And, you know, it won't happen necessarily for October if they're gonna be, the timing would line up, but. But to Reg's point, we should know, you know, immediately what their plan is for, you know, for zoning, if they need zoning relief, what their plan is for that zoning.
Yeah, and if they do a friendly 40B, my understanding is they gotta get the state to approve it
Yeah,
as well, and that's what screwed up the
so that's
castle-
another step.
the
Even
castle-
just getting, the town has to approve it first before it even goes to the state
Yeah, and
to bless it, you know?
Yeah,
and once the state approves it, then they don't have to deal with the planning board.
right. I think it's
So
just a
ZBA.
function, yeah,
But the planning board has historically, and certainly with us. Or in the ZBA, whichever one you wanna look at it.
yeah,
Been very, very interested in a lot of specifics about what is actually going to be developed there before they kind of buy into anything.
Yeah.
And
but
that's,
that's because we created a new zoning regime for you.
yeah,
This would be a function of potentially a variance. Or it would be just a 40B process through the ZBA outside of us, but regardless, none of us at this table know what it is. I think the point is, we want them to look at that question immediately, because
Well-
that's,
They said in their application that they were gonna go for a 40B, friendly 40B.
I remember reading
they
that.
did say that,
Yeah.
but they haven't started, they
Yeah.
haven't gone and said, hey, town, is that okay with you? Or, you know, or
Yeah.
are you gonna go along with that? And I didn't see that in the application.
Okay. So, any other,
I just don't wanna bushwhack them with that question on the 12th.
yeah, no,
you know.
that's a good
I
point.
just
Yeah.
think that's not fair, because I think that's a really big,
So they are going through.
Yeah, so Marie,
It's
Marie's
another
gonna
month. I will reach out,
make sure they,
and let them know that and about contacting Lee and to really determine what they're going to
And
do
what their
before
plan
they
is gonna
present,
be,
yeah, what's it gonna
exactly.
be, so that when they come to us
Exactly.
in February, they're ready and we can sort of take it from there.
good.
So you will do that more.
I will do that, yeah,
That's
'cause
my to-do
yeah,
list.
Betsy and I
I
are
think
the
you want
liaison.
to hear back from Lee Newman as an input, if not for the 12th. Then, you know, prior to the end, you know, the March decision making.
Yeah, we should find that out sooner rather than later, well before the 12th.
Okay, any other questions on Charles? All right, the Needham Housing Authority projects. So we still haven't had a meeting, but hopefully we can,
I'm back now.
yeah. But I did go out and look at the sites and, you know, I think it's for seabeds in Captain Cook. It's pretty straightforward that there's a need for some repairs on the exterior. And I think we determined last year that, or the year before, that fit it into the the appropriate category, and so in my opinion, that's not a question. I think obviously the availability of funds will be a question, and we can come up with some idea. One thing that is really interesting is the relationship between the Seabeds Cook project and the Linden Chambers
Yes, I
project.
don't understand that.
So,
Fair clause.
maybe,
That's,
maybe you can make a comment on that, but I think it's it's complicated, but
I can comment briefly,
and maybe you could comment on it. This is another thing of
and
it.
obviously it'll be subject to the presentation.
Yeah.
on the 5th.
Another thing of interest is the recent decision,
SJC.
like today of.
Which I just read
Yeah.
10 minutes before I came here.
Do you have any opinion how that might affect things? Because I know that there was some risk there.
I can comment on both of them. The problem with the Linden Street redevelopment project has always been not enough funding around under the most optimistic to do it. And that's two, one is to come up with construction funding. And the second one is to come up with the 20-year operating funding, where you have to have annual subsidies per unit to provide the affordability. And the 5.5 million that was granted last year fills the sort of construction funding gap. We think we can get the rest of the construction funding from the application that's going in February 27th this year. There's visibility on where that money is going to come with, thanks to the town of Needham's 5.5 million that fills the gap. There isn't funding to get the level of affordability that the housing authority and the town both want us to continue from the 72 units we now have to the 136 units that we have planned in the future. And a strategy for doing that is to free up funding subsidy units called Faircloth units from Seabeds and Cook by doing that project and moving it to a new funding source, which frees up these subsidy units, and then putting them into the Linden Street project in order to provide the remaining subsidy units.
I still don't, we can offline. it.
And it'll be better to have our experts here. I'm just saying, that's the dependency. When last year at this time, we thought we could do that without having to also have the Seabeds project compete for scarce or non-existing tax credit things like the 4%ers you were just talking about, and the 9%ers. And then there was a lawsuit against HUD that eliminated the program that we were using. And so we have to go to another program that falls short of providing the amount of funding that we need for construction
On seabeds.
on Seabeds and Cook. So we're back to the well on Seabeds and Cook for more construction funding, so that that project has to be started. That then liberates these subsidy units. There are 38 of them for, the first phase, that can then be applied to Linden Street to cause that project to be successful.
I still don't.
And no reason why you can't. Yeah, that's an Emily Actonberg, kind of explanation thing,
Would I be correct in saying that those subsidy units would then underwrite some financing that could be used?
So generally speaking, that's true. So you can have certain vouchers that are, like Section 8 may pay 50%, you're dealing with people that are at 80% AMI, 50% or 30% or, or even below. And the higher the voucher, the greater the operating income and the greater the borrowing. And the borrowing is effectively a soft loan. So it becomes like this permanent financing where it takes out the construction loans. And they're effectively soft loans, you know, for 25 or 30 years, and you have to give up and you negotiate a deed restriction at that time. And they kind of dovetail together, and the deed restriction has to, I think, be at least for that term, and typically it exceeds it. But the greater the operating revenue you have, the greater your borrowing capacity, the same with a private developer. And so the question is, what's the value of those vouchers and the operating income? So I kind of understand some of it, but I'm new to the concept of fair cloth. And I'm new to the concept of like having to move units from one property to another, or vouchers from one property to another, and how that affects either property. It's just, I just don't understand.
Yeah, well, we can get
We'll
into
get into
that, you know, we have a consultant who will
Exactly.
be here.
Yeah.
And then we have, you know, questions that we can pose. to
The other question on the MBTA Communities Act, the Supreme Court ruling, is it upheld completely the constitutionality of the act.
Yeah,
It does not mean that we don't need to come into compliance with the act. And so that it's just as important as ever for the yeses to prevail on the 14th, or our funding will be, at least $1 million will be cut, if not more. And that will obviously be very big pill to not, something we just can't get around here on that. The other thing they ruled is that the HCD or HLC now did not follow procedures for the setting up the guidelines and the regulations. And so they need to still go through that step, and the current guidelines are ineffective, quote unquote. And DHCD or HLC is announced, or Governor Healy announced that they're gonna promulgate emergency regulations by the end of the week,
Right.
whatever that means. But it's still, you know, we still need to, you know, prevail with that yes vote if it isn't going to basically throw a monkey wrench into the Linden Street project.
Okay. Any,
And I'm stating that for the record as a statement of fact, because as a appointed member of the Newton Housing Authority Commissioners, I'm not allowed to lobby in any way, shape, or form. So I just want to point out that that is a statement of fact.
yep, we got
As long as
some.
we don't say that, I think.
Any other questions on Needham Housing?
I have one more update on the High Rock Estates. One, I did meet with Mass Housing Partnership Consultants today on the question of eligibility on that. They now got the full application that we turned in 2 weeks ago with more of the detail on it and so forth. They gave very useful advice with respect to that. They're gonna write an email memo, sort of clarifying. They're not gonna take sides one way or the other, but what exists out there by way of regulatory oversight. And they have the town councils, one-liner that said the project is not there is an eligible, and the rest of it about, well, I guess maybe we could use administrative funds or something like that. They didn't think the administrative funds thing was a starter of any way. But there is a reason why maybe some clarification is needed, and maybe it might turn into being an adjustment to what we make to the application. And it turns around the use of the CPA funds as applied to existing housing, the existing 60 units there versus applied to causing net new 60 units or 100 units or 20 units, and the difference nuances between that. So I'm going to try to get something submitted on that in a week or so to clarify that. They also recommended that maybe the applicant and the chair and vice chair might want to discuss things with town council and get more clarification as to kind of where it's coming, because there's a wide range of discretion in town councils, on how they look at some of these provisions. And ultimately, it usually is the local town council whose opinions should be respected and adjustments made.
So-
there too.
Did we send the questions, the responses to the town council for that particular item?
No, I was waiting for, Reg had, before everything happened with your vacation, the plan was to submit a response to town council rather than your due diligence questions. Because you thought you wouldn't have time to do both before you went away. I saw the due diligence questions come in and I was gonna ask you about the memorandum that you just discussed.
And which I referenced in
Yeah.
the answer to question number 6, where I added that, said we were gonna be having this meeting today. And we would, so I would say both this response from Mass Housing Partnership plus
The
the
responses.
detail should go in together.
Yes,
And then just doing a sit down and discussion with what they would recommend.
right. I think it makes sense to do it after we send everything into Chris and then we'll see.
Exactly.
Perfect. I put on my list.
Okay, anything else on Needham housing? Okay. Park and Rec, there were a couple projects here. Anything of note?
I didn't got a comment.
Oh,
It's funny, and I don't know, Lauren, if you want to pull this one up or if you're able to,
Sure. What is
but
it?
this is the action park.
Your due diligence response?
Yes,
we just got that, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and then, no, item number 2. So there's nothing about their project costs, what funds they're using, what they need it for. It's kind of like a critical element, and I just wasn't sure if it was missing on mine. So, we should go back to them and find out what their projected cost is and what they're using the money for. And how they're raising the balance funds,
What was that last thing you said?
how they're raising the balance of funds.
Yeah,
That's
good
all.
questions. Anybody else?
I would just say, for all the rest of the applications, my same comments I made before for Charles River Center. If anybody has any questions, now that I haven't had a chance to read that one since it came over the transom. We should get the ball in by Lauren as soon as we can, so that, the applicant can walk in the door, having addressed any additional questions raised by the detailed application. Right out of the sheet here. And
Or when we set a due date for any supplemental questions.
And also,
Oh.
Lauren, have they indicated, when are the responses about, Elliott School Playground? They haven't responded,
I
so,
followed up.
okay,
So,
but no response from them after you followed up? Did they get back to you when you nudged, so to speak,
no,
with any response?
we've not connected yet.
Okay,
So, so we'll find out. Hopefully we'll get those shortly.
All right, so as far as any supplemental questions about a week from today? Next one's it?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Then the last set of projects, the Conservation Department and the Needham Parks and Forestry, the Bay Colony Trail, anything to report, any?
Last meeting I mentioned that Reg and I had a site visit on the Bay Colony Trail.
Right.
Nothing since, other than their application. Actually, since you are a participant on the conservation one, I do have a question which I would submit, but can I put it out now?
Yeah, sure.
Only because of the funding issue.
Yeah.
The conservation trail project is admirable. I think it's needed. Is there a way that can be phased? partially this year and partially next, some of the more important areas, Ridge Hill or whatever, that needs more attention than others?
Oh,
Can it be?
yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any fundamental reason why it could be phased, other than it would just make it more expensive. I think there's a lot of volunteer effort associated with this job, but a big cost is this contractor, and, you know, we gotta use, you know, contractors that get paid prevailing wages and all that, and so
Yeah,
that costs, the cost to put in a post to which the volunteers will affix a sign is like $500 a post. And so if we split that up into 2 years, that's just gonna blow up the costs.
I was just, just because of the issue of
But yeah.
spreading the money.
Yeah, I would say though that the most of the effort is with the bigger properties. Because we did have to trim the scope of the work a little bit, to fit in, you know, to the budget that we had originally set out, and which the town put on their capital budget. So the the evolution of the project, you know, could go beyond this year, because there's other things that need to be done. But we didn't put everything into the list at this point,
To this particular proposal.
right?
Okay.
Okay. Anything else? No. All right, so I guess the last item on the agenda is the acknowledgement, funding acknowledgement. I call it the retro acknowledgement, because, you know, most of the things we're talking about have already been built. We put together a list. I picked out 10 projects within the past 10 years, the biggest costs or the biggest grants, but this is just my first cut at it. I was hoping that you all could add to this any projects that you feel should be acknowledged, and then we can go and research whether have been acknowledged or not. Just my walking around town, I know that the town common project is acknowledged with a plaque. I just discovered that the reservoir trail project, which was 860,000, that is acknowledged. It's on the there's like not a kiosk, but a sign that has a map on it. And they do mention the Community Preservation Committee, so you know that. And I forgot to change that to a yes. But those are some of the other ones that I don't think are acknowledged at this point. But maybe if any of you have some time, you go maybe take a look at some of these and see if they have been acknowledged. For buildings, I think we can get little plaques made up, brass plaques. I don't think that would be a big expense. They cost $500, maybe 1,000 at the most. The trail and open space projects, we could include those in this sign project that we have. You know, we can make up the type of signs that we were gonna make up anyway, you know, assuming that it gets funded, to acknowledge some of those projects. But if there's any other project that it's not on this list that you think it would be,
One of the things that might be helpful, is if you send that around, I'm sure you can do that. But there's also a summary list of all projects since day one.
yeah, that's where I got this.
It isn't it isn't the spreadsheet. There's a very complicated spreadsheet version of it. But there's one that's just a sort of simple thing that I'm not sure most or any of the new members here.
I circulated it
did.
after our last
You
meeting.
did, okay, sorry, and then I forgot.
Yeah.
So good.
So if
So,
anybody identified any other projects that they thought would be a good fit for this list, just let me know.
Do you wanna just divvy up names of people now to go through?
yeah, that's good.
And then, so
The first two, like, they were
contracts.
funded last year or the year before. And, I think we have now in our agreements that the, applicant,
I believe we do as
Yeah.
well, but I'll check with Cecilia.
yeah, because maybe we want to be a little more specific about what the acknowledgement would be. In terms of the size or whatever.
I can reach out to the school committee and, the school board and, Dan's office, and I can go over there and take a look and see if there is anything. So do you want to put me down for Emily Grover? And, I'll do Cricket Field as well.
I can take on Rosemary Pool
That's a good one.
and Mills Field.
And Cricket Field. I was gonna do cricket. He's gonna do Mills.
Yeah, Mills is not doing it, right, yeah.
I can check out the Memorial Park building.
Well,
Check out. town
Some of the
hall.
trail ones I've already looked at, like Eastman, Newman, there's nothing there. The reservoir,
Town hall.
the town hall is, I've looked around, I haven't seen anything on town hall, but right across town hall. Where the common is, there's a plaque there that does mention the, and then we went to the,
I love going into.
yeah, we went to the Emery Grover, dedication. And I walked all around the building, I didn't see anything,
yeah,
and there was a very nice plaque for everybody else.
Did you see Dan Goodicats when you were there? Did you ask him at all?
I didn't ask,
at the opening?
Yeah.
you mean?
Yeah.
I didn't ask anybody, and so I'm, I wouldn't bet my life that there was not acknowledging it, but I couldn't find anything. Which brings up the question, if there was a nice big plaque that acknowledges everybody with
What happened to
CPCs, were we gonna have a little plaque at the bottom?
Right, what do you do then? That just like to add on to that, that's
Yeah,
it's
well-
like awkward, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems awkward, but it's like unfair.
No, it is, it's totally unfair, definitely. What's the Valente Open Space Project? I don't
Yeah,
even,
that's out,
the farm, obviously, it's part of it.
no, it's like you go out,
Thank you.
towards Wellesley on,
Near Brook.
Forest?
Brookside.
On Forest Street?
no,
or
what's the street
Brookside?
that goes right to Wellesley, goes.
Brookside?
No, it's a main street.
Forest is the one that goes into Wellesley. Forest. Street.
Yeah.
Or Central?
Off Valenti Farms, yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then
off
so
Valente
Forest
is
and then
Forest, and then Brookside goes
Brookside
off.
goes.
Brookside, yeah.
Yeah, what's down, it's that.
Forest
Yeah.
is the one, okay, so that's,
Yeah, there's nothing there, it's just a sign. That talks about the Conservation Commission, it doesn't mention the CPC.
oh, so there is a sign, just not
Yeah,
anything.
so that's
with our
something
name.
that,
Okay,
like on this little sign project, we have like some miscellaneous signs,
yeah,
if necessary, we could just make up something and stick it onto the existing sign.
So which of these projects would, so the Volante open space could be done through the new trail signage
Yeah.
project if it's approved, as well as the reservoir trail?
Well, the Reservoir Trail is already taken care of. Newman,
Oh,
well,
right.
the Eastman.
You
one
said
is
yeah,
next.
we're
yes.
proposing a
Okay.
kiosk there, so we could. put
So that
something on
does-
the- We could put something on the kiosk.
So we wouldn't do, we don't, nobody needs to go look at that, if
No.
we're- that's already.
No, like the ones that I had put no on, I think.
Are just the ones that we, okay,
Yeah, the ones with the question marks are the ones.
okay.
And again, there may be some other projects that
I have to look into.
fell off the
Yeah.
list.
Yeah, do we have access to that list, Dave?
I will
That'd
circulate
be great.
this one, but the larger list of all of the projects.
I've seen that, yeah, exactly,
But I'll
but like maybe
circulate
like
this one as a Word,
even like a-
and everybody can maybe
that
add
we
it
can,
to it.
yeah, add it ourselves,
Yeah.
right? That might be nice.
Sure.
Okay, good. So, I don't have any other issues to bring up, but,
Ready to adjourn?
I was just gonna ask, at the ETA for the fiscal 26 revenue estimate memo for.
The last time I spoke with Cecilia, she thought we would have it in February, but I will find out if there's any update to that or any chance it might come sooner.
yeah, that's. I'm kind of pushing for that, but. I think, like I'm an engineer, so like I'm used to working with 90% of information. You know? These accountants.
Well, I think they have.
They weren't 100%.
They do have to wait for the final certification, revenue, free cash certification, but I think those have come in at this
Yeah,
point.
the
so-
tax rates and everything.
Oh, we know, I believe the free cash was certified. I believe the total that we have for free cash is
Yeah, but even if it's,
is current.
Well,
It's
and
the-
also
the
that you have to
2026.
wait for DOR to certify how much CPC revenue is, match is available, and that's coming in as well.
Right, it was the fiscal year 2026 estimated receipts.
Mhm.
I think those are the numbers that are in question.
yeah, but, all you need to do is assume what it was last year, and it's conservative. That's what I've already done it. I just don't wanna send it out to the committee. Cause I get in trouble.
Just call it Dave's guess.
Yeah, no,
90%
With all the
No, I-
exclusions and qualifications. that-
the CPC gets about. $3.5 million, let's say a year.
Right.
Of that, about 1.2 million is already
Really?
committed to the bonds for the
Uh-huh.
town hall and for Emery Glover. Then you take out the 10% for open space. You don't have to give anything to recreation because their bond payment allocation takes care of that. So everything else is either theoretically available for housing
Right.
or recreation.
Mhm.
You got like 20%'s got to go to housing.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not rocket science, but I don't want to. Get into any battles. Okay, so,
I like it when it says Dave Davis, myself too.
any other comments? If not, let's,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor?
Right.
Aye.
All right, unanimous, thank you.
You run a good ship.
Yeah.